So, I want to start with something that might sound weird. I've been thinking a lot this week. Mm, I'm done with churches that make me feel like I need to check my brain at the door. I'm done mincing words with spaces that say they love everyone and then have a list hidden in the fine print of everyone they actually don't love. I'm done with a Christianity that's basically just capitalism with a cross on it. And if you're tuning in, if you're listening to this, I think that you are too. Because here's the thing, the frustration you feel about the church, it might actually be the most spiritually alive thing about you. That frustration you sense is you sensing that something is wrong. That the thing being sold to you isn't the thing that was promised. So today, I want to talk about a different story. Not a comfortable one, an old one, but one that hits different when you actually read it straight. Because Palm Sunday, of all things, might be exactly what we need right now. I'm your host, Pastor Andrew Shipley. This is the Missiongathering Christian Church podcast. We are continuing our series of Unlearning Empire, and this is the beginning of Holy Week. So let's get into it. Day. Okay, so Palm Sunday, right? If you grew up in church, you probably had a specific kind of image in your head of what that means, right? It could be kids waving branches. Maybe you were one of those kids. Maybe you had a little felt board with a little felt donkey on it and they put Jesus on top of it. Maybe you shouted Hosanna over and over again. And the vibe was very much wholesome and safe and kind of festive. And those should be cherished memories, but I want to offer you a completely different frame. Because the actual historical moment is not safe. It's not safe at all. So here's the context. It's Passover in Jerusalem, and Passover for the Jewish people under Roman occupation is a politically loaded holiday. Because Passover is literally a celebration of liberation from the Empire of Egypt. It's the story of an enslaved people going free. And Rome, the occupying force, the empire running everything, Rome knows this about Passover. They know that Passover is the time when resistance movements get ignited, when sacred memory turns into action. So every Passover, the Roman governor would ride into Jerusalem from the west. With a military procession, there was war horses and soldiers in armor, imperial banners, the whole spectacle. And the message was clear. We are here. We are in charge. Don't try anything. So that's the one procession coming in from the west. But on the other side of Jerusalem, from the east, another procession was forming. A peasant teacher from Galilee riding on a borrowed donkey, surrounded by ordinary people, not soldiers, not religious elites, just people. And they're waving branches and laying their coats on the ground and shouting, "Blessed is the King." Two parades. Same city, same day. Two completely different versions of what power looks like. And Jesus, this is important. Jesus planned all of this. He didn't accidentally wander into Jerusalem at Passover. He sent people ahead to arrange the donkey. He chose the route. He chose the timing. This was intentional street theater, a public, symbolic confrontation with imperial Rome. You might be saying, why does this matter? Well, I think this matters so much for us right now because a lot of us have been taught a version of Jesus that's basically passive. The gentle, meek, and mild Jesus who tells you to be patient, who says the system isn't your concern, just focus on your personal relationship with God. But that Jesus, the one that so many of us grew up with, being told about, doesn't exist in this story. This Jesus is doing something very specific. He's saying there's another way of organizing the world. There's a different kind of power than the one you're used to, and I'm going to perform it in public, in front of empire, and all of their spectacle right now. I will lampoon them. That's the Jesus I think a lot of us actually want to follow, but not a lot of us got to get to know. So here's something I've been sitting with, right? Empire doesn't just conquer territories. They don't just come in and enforce borders and take resources and do all that. They do all of that stuff. But empire gets in your head. And I think for a lot of us, especially those who grew up in American Christianity, we were discipled by empire long before we were discipled by Jesus. Like, I think about what we were actually taught. We were taught that our worth comes from our productivity, that security comes from accumulation, that the goal is to get yours, protect it, and pass it on, that some people are just more deserving than others, that the way the world is organized right now is basically the natural order, maybe even God ordained. And then we were handed a Bible and told that the same God who ordained the current system also loves the poor and the outcast, the immigrant and the orphan, the person whose society has thrown away. And at some point, you got honest with yourself and you said, wait, which one is it? Because those two things are not compatible. And a lot of us, when we hit that contradiction, we began the process of deconstruction. We stepped back from the church. We started asking questions we weren't supposed to ask. We couldn't keep performing a faith we didn't actually believe anymore. And I want to say something to anyone, like if it's you, friend, who's listening right now that's in that place. This is where you're at. That wasn't losing your faith. That was your faith trying to survive. The frustration you feel about whitewashed, empire baptized Christianity is actually you being loyal to something truer than what they want you to be loyal to. The theologian Walter Brueggemann called this prophetic information, like the capacity to see beyond the way things are and hold on to a vision of the way things could be. And Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a borrowed donkey with a bunch of peasants throwing palm branches and coats down is doing exactly this. He's not saying accept the system. He's not saying be grateful for what you have. He's not saying just overlook everything. He's saying, look, there is another world possible, and I am going to embody it publicly, right here, right now, even though it's going to cost me everything. I want to name something directly. A lot of us have walked away from the church because the church kept blessing the empire. The church blessed colonization, practically invented it. The church blessed slavery, made it even worse than it was before. The church blessed the prosperity gospel, the idea that God rewards wealth and that poverty is basically a spiritual failure. The church blessed the idea that you should be nice to people in power and suspicious of people without it. And if you walked away from that, I don't blame you. And you know what, Fred? I think Jesus would actually agree with you. Because the Jesus in this story, the Jesus that we find in the Gospels, is writing directly at the people who baptized empire with religious language. He goes to the temple, the religious power center, and flips the tables of the money changers. He's not just critiquing Rome, he's critiquing the religious establishment that made its peace with Rome in exchange for safety and relevance. Does that sound familiar? Are there religious establishments that have traded their ability to critique the system in exchange for safety and relevance within our current system? Here's something I genuinely find fascinating. Jesus enters Jerusalem without weapons. There's no militia. There's no plan for violent uprising. They're completely unarmed. And the empire still feels threatened by them. Why? Friend, I'm going to tell you, it's because empire is not only threatened by violence, empire owns violence. Empire lives and breathes in violence. Empire is threatened by alternatives. You see, the moment people start believing that the current system is not inevitable, that there's another way to organize society, another way to think about power and wealth and dignity, the whole thing starts to wobble. Empire needs you to believe that there is no alternative. That it's not just a political strategy, it's a psychological strategy. The moment you can imagine something different, you stop consenting to the thing that's in front of you. And Jesus is very publicly, very deliberately inviting people to imagine something different. A community where worth isn't tied to productivity, where dignity isn't distributed by wealth, where the last are first and the first are last, where love is the organizing principle of society, not domination, not extraction, not accumulation. Reverend Cornel West puts it, justice is what love looks like in public. And that love in public, friends, that is what makes empire the most nervous. Because love refuses to accept the logic of the system. Love says that the person matters. Love says that this is not okay. Love says that we can do better, we can be better, and we are better than this. And when enough people start living that out in community together consistently, it becomes genuinely destabilizing to the status quo. And I know what you're thinking, but that's not naive idealism. That's not some pie in the sky baloney. That's exactly what empire is afraid of. And in this story, right? In this reading, like I was reading the story in John, there's a moment that I can't stop thinking about as the religious leaders, the Pharisees, are watching the procession. The crowd is shouting, the energy is electric, and the Pharisees say to Jesus, "Teacher, tell your people to be quiet." The subtext is, you're making this dangerous. You're disturbing the peace. You know Rome is here. And Jesus says if they were silent, the stones would cry out. I love this so much because that's the thing power does, right? Power tries to control through respectability politics what can be said out loud. Power decides what counts as legitimate conversation and what gets dismissed as fringe or radical or unreasonable. And then people learn to self-censor. We learn which questions we're allowed to ask. We learn what rooms we can say certain things in and what rooms we have to go quiet in. And here is Jesus saying the truth doesn't disappear because you silence it. It finds a voice, it leaks through. Even the stones, he says, would cry out. And think about how many of us have things we've been told to be quiet about. Questions we were told weren't okay to ask. Doubts we were told would damage our faith. Experiences we were told didn't fit into the story the institution needed to tell. Palm Sunday is for those of us, is for you, the people who got tired of being quiet. It's for people that decided telling the truth mattered more than keeping the peace with institutions that weren't keeping the faith with us. That's a lot, okay? And I want to land somewhere practical because I'm not interested in a podcast that just makes you feel seen and then doesn't give you anywhere to go. Here's where I want to land. Missiongathering is a community that is trying imperfectly, consistently, and stubbornly to be the second procession. Not the imperial procession, not the church that blessed the empire procession. We're trying to be the one with the borrowed donkey, with the ordinary people and no weapons, and wild, stubborn belief that another world is possible. We are a hodgepodge of people. We are queer-affirming. We're decolonization committed. We are full of people who've been burned by church and showed up here anyway. Because something in them wasn't yet done with the project of trying to figure out what it means to live like Jesus actually meant what he said in the Gospels. If any of that resonates with you, I want to extend an invitation, not a pressure, an invitation. Come check us out. Come skeptical. Come with your questions. Come with you still in the middle of destruction. Come having sworn off church 3 times before. Come with all of it. Because we've already got people like that. A lot of them. And there's space for you at our table. Because we're not trying to give you the empire version of Jesus. We're not trying to do something harder and more interesting for no reason. We're trying to do something harder and more interesting to actually follow the guy on the borrowed donkey into whatever that costs us. And here's the thing about that road. It doesn't end in Palm Sunday. The story keeps going. It goes through Good Friday, through the cross, through all of the places where following Jesus generally is costly. But it also goes through Easter Sunday, through resurrection, through the stubborn insistence that love gets the last word. Not empire, not violence, not systems that crush people, but love. If you want to walk that road with a community that's trying to mean it, we'd love to have you on this journey. So thanks for being here. If this episode connected with something and you share it with someone, not a sales pitch, just a hey, this might be worth your time. You can find Missiongathering online and in person. Links are in the show notes. And whatever you're carrying into this week, into this Holy Week, I hope you find at least one moment where you choose love over fear. Friend, that's the whole game, honestly. I'll see you tomorrow.